So I'm Marcie Jastrow. Ooh, that's not good. I guess I have to stand. I'm Marcie Jastrow, and I'm the moderator for this panel. Funny story of how this came up. I was sitting listening to someone who seemed pretty well versed in talking to brands about the metaverse, but never really brought world building into play. And so I had said to my friend who said, oh, well, let's do a panel on it at AWE. I'll moderate it. Well, she isn't here, and I am. And that's my friend Amy Peck. So let's all give her a round of applause. But I'm thrilled because there are some really great people on this panel with me. Just a little background on me. I've been in post-production, feature entertainment, media entertainment for over 20 years. Started my career in post-production, really worked on the creative and the technology side of every iteration from film to digital. Then went on to Technicolor, where I led the immersive team for 4 years. Built something called the Technicolor Experience Center, mainly focusing on new technologies, which was VR, AR, and MR at the time. And then most recently went to a small little startup for a collaboration tool similar to Zoom, but with low latency, called Evercast. Just recently I was announced as the person who will be helping to build the metaverse for the Shiba Inu coin and the Shiba Inu brand, which is super exciting. So that's why I want to hear about world building. I will be building this metaverse, and I'm excited to learn from all of my friends on this stage. So Maureen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do. Turn it on.
Hello, great. I'm Maureen. I'm CEO, co-founder of Baobab Studios. We're the 9-time Emmy-winning studio, animation interactive studio. We have traditionally made a lot of our IP in VR, and now we've adapted that into, it's going to be 3 Disney Plus shows, Netflix, HBO Max, as well as books with Penguin Random House Macmillan, and also games with, I can't announce yet. And then we worked with amazing talent like Oprah, John Legend, Constance Wu, oftentimes women and minorities, because that's what we care about. And I'm excited to be talking to you today. Thanks.
Jackie?
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Bosnjak. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mach, a sound technology company. We started off early on with a sound studio called Q Department that landed up working with a lot of big directors on VR, where I sort of met everybody here, actually. And early on, we hit a lot of the sort of roadblocks and pain points that creators and developers would later figure out in VR and XR and building these worlds. And we were really frustrated that a lot of the technology companies were just sort of saying things, whatever you know about sound production, just throw it out the window because this is the new way to do it. And we were excited about bringing all the ingenuity, keeping studios open and getting artists the ability to work in these new mediums, especially since sound was like so critical for immersion. And it's such a big new place to work in. Why wouldn't you do that? And so we've built like a workflow tool for creators to extend their practices and audio best practices into these new worlds. And then we've also built an SDK for developers that has unified a very broken pipeline of multi-channel and spatial audio and sort of future-proofed it, allowed best practices to still be extended into it, and then also a transcoder that allows for interoperability. Our universal delivery format has no filtering or processing. It's 100% transparent, so it acts as this great universal delivery format for any other format. And we're excited as we're building these things to make sure that we continue to bring artists' full creativity into these new mediums.
Great. Jenna?
Props for you making it Friday afternoon. Good job, guys. I'm Jenna Seiden. I'm currently overseeing a team of business development execs over at Niantic. I've only been there for 4 or 5 months, but basically what I do in my entire career has been acting as an interpreter between storytellers and platforms. Anytime there's a new platform for storytelling, be it games, film, TV, digital, I have to be there, I want to be there. And so I've had a lot of experience in sports, entertainment, video games, and very proud to be here and share the stage with all of you.
Jack.
Hello, I'm Jack McCauley. I'm the co-founder of Oculus. Currently, I teach at UC Berkeley in environmental engineering. I'm a video game engineer. I don't know how I ended up in environmental engineering. I think I'm trying to do good with the environment. So, I'm also working in cybersecurity, not so much virtual reality anymore, although I've been involved with it for 40 years in some way or another. And I'm hoping that whatever message I conveyed today, you guys will get it. People don't get me, so.
We'll have you dumb it down. Okay, so here's the deal. What is world building? I am just going to give you a quick definition of what it means. World building is the process of constructing a world, originally an imaginary world, usually fantasy or sci-fi, associated with a fictional universe, developing an imaginary setting with coherent qualities such as history, geography, ecology, are key tasks for many science fiction or fantasy writers. I believe that what's happened is it all started in, my Minority Report, where Alex McDowell really kind of went into a lot of the world building in film, but gaming really is where it is prevalent most. So Maureen, you took some rich IP, you've grown it, you started in a lot of VR, you've had Eric, and you have done amazing with your IP, I must say. Tell me, when you decide to pick a title or to do a project, how much world building goes into it?
Sometimes it starts with the world, and sometimes it starts with the characters, and oftentimes directors tend to either be high concept and then have to drill down into who are the individual characters, and some directors prefer to start with, these are the characters in the relationship and what's the world they live in. So we have different directors in our studio that approach it from many different ways. But a lot of our original projects came from Eric, and he tends to do both because he's awesome. But we specifically do animation. And for animation, the awesome thing about animation is while live action is still somewhat constrained by reality, I know there's all the special effects and whatnot, animation has always been limited only by the creativity within the director's head. So to take advantage of animation, we put you in fantastical situations, fantastical worlds. So that is something unique to animation that we always have to be thinking about right from the beginning to make it make sense that we are doing an animation. But the interesting thing about VR is when we're doing VR, you could just, in normal traditional cinema, right, you can build the world and make it a linear, you don't have to show everything. But in VR, we wanted you to be able to walk around to fully understand the world, which means we had to build out a lot more of the set, build out a lot of backstory, because you may wander out of this building, see other people, so it makes it even that much richer. I started out in games, actually, at Zynga. Farmville franchise was my franchise. But we didn't go as in-depth with the characters, but definitely building out the entire world you had to do. And it's interesting now with Metaverse, because in a way you're merging those mediums together. You're thinking about the deep stories between the human relationships between the characters, whether they're animals or humans or whatnot, but also very much thinking about the rules of the universe from a gameplay perspective, and what is your role as the viewer inside that world, which character you get to choose, and how do you impact the world around you.
And so do you find that you're making moral, ethical choices when you're building these worlds?
Definitely, and I think it's especially important for the metaverse, because if it is a digital new reality, we don't want to make it as shitty as our current world is today. But a lot of the projects we've done, for example, Baba Yaga, which Jenna helped make come to life, is about it's all female cast. It's Kate Winslet, Jennifer Hudson, Glenn Close, Daisy Ridley, and it's about environmentalism. It's like at the end, like you have choices to make throughout, and we want to see what choices you make, because storytelling is about putting the character under pressure, right, to reveal their true nature. Like Han Solo, when he comes back at the end, you're like, yeah, I knew he always had it. That's who he really is. And in Metaverse/VR, and also games, we can put you under pressure and see what it reveals about you. And we want you to understand who you are. So in Baba Yaga, at the end, you could decide to become this super evil witch that's super powerful and keep all the power yourself, or you can share it with the villagers, but you're less powerful, and that changes whether environment and humanity can live together, or if it's a zero-sum game. So a lot of our experiences have those human culture questions built into them because we want it to say something.
Amazing. Hey, Jack, so you built one of the Oculus, and that's crazy, honestly. I mean, like, you think about that. What were you thinking when you were building that? Like, did you think about fantastical worlds? Did you think about metaverses? Did you think about, like, where did you think? Because what was that, 2011, 2012? We're now 2022. We've all lived a really crazy last 3 years. So where were you going with it?
Well, I was recruited in 2012 by Palmer Luckey and Brendan Uribe. And we had a demo game ported by John Carmack to the Oculus. That was my first experience in looking at high-rendered content in virtual reality. Before that, it's pretty low-res and it's not as impressive. So anyone could see at the time that what we could do with it. Now, I will have a couple comments about video games in general and the metaverse, not to leave your question, but developing assets for video games is challenging. It's very difficult. And take Grand Theft Auto 5. GTA 5 is a great game, but $250 million in development cost and an additional $200,000 in marketing is $500 million. And the problem with a video game, like a movie, if it's a flop, you don't make any money and you lose the investment. So I think the daunting challenge with the metaverse is creating the assets and content for it. And I'll give you an example. I worked at Electronic Arts in Burnaby, Canada, and we had hundreds of artists who were using AutoCAD, which is a 3D CAD program for creating assets for the game. And it takes thousands of hours. An experienced CAD person can do it fairly quickly, and there's a lot of things you can't get right. And I'm looking out the window here when my fellow speakers are talking. I'm watching these plants out here blowing in the wind. It's really hard to get that right. It's hard to get smoke and water. And if you do it wrong, it's very distracting. That's why I look, that's terrible. The smoke coming out of that rocket. So it's just really tough to do that on a mass scale. Grand Theft Auto 5, if you're a competent player, you can get through the entire universe there in a week. And then after that, it gets kind of boring. So the best part about a video, the thing that makes a video game good is the storytelling part. It has to tell a story, and you have to be walked through the story. And a game developer, when they're doing their pitch, has a storyboard. It's basically done by an artist by hand. Not so much anymore, but that's kind of how we would do it. And you play the story out in front of the producers and executives, and they kind of get where you're going with it. So it's a lot like it's just entertainment. It's a lot like making a movie in a way. So I was chief engineer on Guitar Hero. That's a completely different arcade.
Well, I want to stop you there for a moment because I think that's super interesting. So let's talk about Guitar Hero. You get to be a musician playing a guitar. And at the time, what was that, 2008? 2000?
I saw the demo version at CES in 2005.
Okay, so so think about that we were now, 17 years or so later, and the idea of bringing a physical object that is not a hand controller into a game. And I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little technical, but how did you figure that out? Like, was that always the very beginning of when you were world building and figuring out the game? Like, that to me is super interesting.
It's a genre of game called a rhythm game. And there's this game called Dance Dance Revolution.
Yeah.
Came out in '99. That is a predecessor to Guitar Hero. As a matter of fact, we got sued, a company, because we made a clone of DDR. So the next logical thing was looking at, there's a Japanese game, it's a guitar game, and that's kind of what we kind of ripped it off a little bit. But it just had, J-pop music, and it was crummy. And so somebody comes up with the idea, not I, but somebody comes up with the idea, why don't we have it, like port like American rock and roll to it, and then see how that works. And this is the demo I saw, and pretty much saw that at 2005. And I had trouble seeing that back then. I helped them out, I helped them out. I helped build their guitars and stuff and do the design work on it. But I had no idea what the success would be. You just don't know. And it was a smash hit, $2 billion franchise. The first video game is 64 million pieces, so I had no clue about that. It's just, I knew how to do the work, and I got hired to do the work. But it is an arcade-ish thing. It's short play. And for video games, you got to keep people engaged for hours and to be able to purchase assets and content. So the world has changed since I left that business. It's been 8 years or something, and no, 7 years. Now they don't ship DVDs and CDs to you anymore. You download the content. The best part about it is, and this is the part of the metaverse question, I think, is the social aspect of video games is missed, and that's one of the most important aspects. When you're playing an FPS, you're playing in teams with people from all over the world, and they become your friends. So I think that's an important part of it, and if you're going to design the metaverse, that social aspect, you're going to get people engaged, has to be there. And you know, Facebook is probably a good candidate to do those kinds of things. So,
Great, Jenna, Niantic. So, what does your team do, and where are you trying to maneuver your plays through the metaverse, if you can say?
I'll try. So I oversee business development, but we're a little bit producerial, if you will, as well as doing the deals. The deal part's the easy part. It's coming up with understanding the feature set and interpreting that, like I said before, with all the folks coming in who have all these ideas and sort of setting expectations. So that's what we do. But technically, what I do is I handle all first-party licensing for our game studio. I handle all of our publishing deals for our third-party games publishing business, and I handle our partnership approach to Lightship, which are more gamified experiences, less, quote, games, if you will. But if you think about Niantic, we are world building on top of the world. And that's what we're doing. So either we get an intellectual property, you know, we had to sunset Harry Potter, but, you know, we were building Harry Potter. You know, we are adapting it. We are not doing a transmedia storytelling play. We are not extending that storyline in a way that J.K. Rowling set out. That wasn't up. We didn't have that right to do that. So we were adapting it. That's the difference between transmedia storytelling and narrative design as compared to, well, not narrative design, and adaptation. But then we have original IP. We announced a soft launch a product called Peridot. It's like Tamagotchi. It's really cute little characters. It's our first AR first, completely AR first title, and we're building that world. But we can do whatever we want with it. And it's sort of funny, you know, I come from video games as well. I used to represent Harmonix, so we have a lot to talk about. Like I said to this very lovely team, I said, well, tell me about the mythology. You know, what's the story behind these characters? And I'll be honest with you, it's very light. It's like, oh, we had this great concept, Peridot, gems come from the earth, and it's really cool. I'm like, and? They're like, we need more? I go, yeah. I don't care if we ever exploit that storyline, but I want to know their backstories. I want to know where they came from, where their parents came from, what planet they came from. We need to know that. Like, I worked on Halo. That Bible is ginormous, right? And because of that, we have a great repository to go to tell all the stories that I did for Halo. Produced a series for Halo 4 called Halo 4 Forward Unto Dawn. I wasn't able to do that unless I could say, okay, what's the backstory to all of this? And we decided to stay away from Master Chief. You know, that's difficult because you've got a lot of expectations. So what part of that universe do you want to tell on what platform the right way?
So ethics, mission, values, backstory, storytelling, these are all very fundamental things to building the metaverse as well. Because, you know, and I have a hard time saying the metaverse because I feel like it's very broad. I think I like to call them mini-verses because I think that each one at some point will become interconnected, but ultimately everyone's going to build their own little world based on their own little attributes. Would you agree with that?
We're very fortunate that we had Pokemon Go, and it's huge, but we're not always going to have these $100 million+ billion-dollar franchises. There's nothing wrong with creating your own little, you know, ecosystems. I mean, people are doing that in Minecraft and Roblox. That's fine. Keep that loyal audience loyal. And you know what we're doing, again, I'm not trying to promote Niantic, but we had this soft announcement last week at our Lightship Summit, and we talked about our virtual positioning system. I can talk about like the shared social experience that Jack mentioned, dead on. but we have this thing that we announced called Campfire, and it's our social app for the real world metaverse, because everybody's asking, well, great, I'm going to create this app, this experience, but who's going to find it? So Campfire, in its nascent stages, is a app where if I'm in there playing Pokemon Go and Jackie's in there playing Ingress or another title, it's so hyper-local that I can see what she's doing. And even though Ingress is a smaller base, or it's a brand new title, Baba Yaga suddenly does an AR app and it's just starting, I see Maureen's my friend. Now my eyeballs of my Pokemon Go audience now get exposed to, thank goodness, to Baba Yaga audience and vice versa. That's how we did it at Maker Studios with YouTubers. Someone with a big audience would jump into someone with a little audience, and that eyeball ecosystem saw the other thing. So Campfire is helping with discoverability on that nature. So it's
Very nice.
we'll see where that goes, but it's.
I can say as a creator, like on these metaverse platforms, they really want you to do stuff that can be taken across, because that's better for retention on their platform, right? At the same time, as a creator, I don't necessarily want to do that because I'm a control freak and I want to make everything the way I want it to be. Like, I don't want you to bring your avatar in from outside that doesn't fit into my world. That being said, if somebody has so much built into their avatar, they love their avatar so much, that is their identity, you want to take that away from them, and that's one of the reasons they're on this platform in the first place. So it is trying to find a thing in between. But also this question about interoperability between metaverses too. Everyone talks about this, but at the same time, just business reality, if you want to make money, which is what all companies want to do, you want to hoard, keep all to yourself.
Well, you want to keep your community close, and you want to make sure that what you're building is really specific to your community. And it wouldn't make any sense if you were building for 18 to 25-year-old girls to not have those very specific things in that metaverse. So you really need to know the demographic and who wants to come into your world and what happens in your world, and is there a marketplace, and can I do exchange, can I have social environments, can I trade, can I barter, can I do all these things that you do in the real world, but it may appear differently, I think, in the metaverse. So, Jackie, people think sound comes at the end, the very beginning and at the end. How much input on story and building of these stories and these world building does sound come in? And when does it come in?
Well, I always like to say, with creation, God said, let there be light, said, sound, or the Big Bang, sound. So I always think about how sound is very ground level and needs to be thought about right from the beginning. But that's obviously not always the case. But I think that if you work with a team and directors that really want to create an emotion, I think that sound becomes almost like the gravity of that world. And sound is very connected to both balance and memory. And so it's a very, very powerful tool to suspend disbelief that you're somewhere that you're not. And I think it's a really interesting way to work in worlds. Okay. Yeah, so I think sound's really critical for immersion, and thinking about it and doing it right is really important. And unfortunately, it has been an afterthought. I think even in video games, it's sort of been the ugly sister that nobody thought about. Nobody wanted to dedicate any time or energy to the sound aspect, but that's changing now with this sort of new medium where I do feel sound is critical.
And so building a metaverse, what does that look like for a sound company? I know that's very broad. Sorry about that. But what do you have to think about? What are the attributes on the sound side? Because I feel like that's super important.
Well, I think, a lot of the times, we work together on The Martian with Robert Stromberg, and I always bring up how you said it was sort of like building a plane while you're flying it. I feel like in these new mediums as creators, we often have barriers to create what we need to do, and we've got to find ways around it. And so I think that as long as we are constantly trying to bring our full creativity into these spaces, they're going to be interesting. I think, Marshall McLuhan said, we build our tools and then they shape us. I think it would be really sad if we build these metaverses where there's a lot of presets and things that happen where we no longer have control as creators over them or as developers. And, I strive to, our tagline is Defenders of the Audio Realm, and we're really trying to defend the space for creativity, keep studios open, and keep engineers and artists being able to take the master and the craft of sound production and bring it into these worlds where it is suddenly really critical for the suspension of disbelief that you're somewhere that you're not. And then also hyperreality, being able to break reality. We did some crazy things with Mr. Robot and Disney Lion King, where they asked us to remix Disney Lion King, and when you stood and looked forward, it was the Okavango at night, and when you look backwards, it was in the day. And just that sort of physicality of being able to break that hyperreality and do that with the technology that you can do today was just like a really simple but interesting way. And we're seeing, just like the electric tape recorder changed how sound was made, spatial audio as a new medium is really making people think of sound in very, very different ways. And I'm really excited to see like this new crop of engineers and what they're going to do with it.
Interesting. Okay, great. So let's talk about Web 3.0. Just because, why not, right? When you're building a metaverse, do you start with internet, VR, mobile? How do you, so when I was trying to sell the concept of oh, let's do a VR project, brands always said to me, well, how many eyeballs am I going to get? And how am I going to, what's my ROI? And so, the metaverse, again, very broad statement, but ultimately, when you're building these worlds, what do you think about first? Does that come into play, what your ultimate deliverable is? Do you want it to go cross-platform? Maureen, why don't you take this one?
For us, we want it to be able to go cross-platform. We see each medium as just a vehicle for the IP to go out. And different mediums have different advantages, so then we do franchise ranking, right? How franchisable is this IP, and which mediums is it best in, and then we tackle it in that order. So that's, at least for our company, how we do it. And based off of how good it is for that medium, how optimized it is, we change it for that. But within each medium, like for example, if we're doing a game, if you're building something for, let's say, the Fortnite platform, this is a different demographic than, say, if you're going to do Roblox platform versus the VR platform. There are some overlap between those, but very different demographics. And so you need to make sure that what it is that you're creating is appealing to that demographic. So it's kind of both. Oftentimes we think we first have an idea that we love. Our studio has to look, because if you're going to work on something for that long, you have to love it. So there's that. So story, in a way, character, world comes first, and then we say, what medium is it good for, and therefore what platforms within that medium is it good for.
And so what are you looking at for Web 3.0?
Well, Web3 for us is also another vehicle for you to be able to put your IP out there. But what's really interesting is I feel like it's a very small number of people who are purchasing, because it's still really hard to like your MetaMask and do all that stuff. So it's a small group of people, but they're very passionate. And so I think of Web3 as a way to learn about building communities. But when I also think about how, like, if you look at the demographics of those buying Web3, a lot of it seems to be white dudes with a lot of money, is at least the research I've read. And so if I'm trying to reach a very broad audience, at least now where Web3 is right now, that may not be the community that I ultimately want to get. So I can learn more about like what they love about this IP, but it's not necessarily going to translate therefore into all the other communities and go wide. So I see it only as part of the strategy rather than the strategy.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Hey, Jack, so let's talk about the security concerns around all of these different new iterations, the internet, VR, all of the metaverse. Like, I didn't realize you were in cybersecurity, so this is super interesting to me. How do we protect our identities? How do we protect the users? How do we make sure that, people are building a kind metaverse, a kinder internet, a kinder place? Because I think that those are all things that need to be thought about.
Yeah. The part of the internet that I don't like is all of the violence that I see on it. There's things I've seen on the internet that I wish I had not looked at. And on the other hand, there can't be a political body that controls that either. So has to be some sort of happy medium. In terms of AI, I think that there is a way to use AI to mitigate the amount of stuff negative stuff that's harmful. And, I beg to differ I hear people say, well, it's because of video games that there's violence. That's just not true. The studies have shown that that's not true. And when I was a kid, we watched cartoons that were really violent, so we'd go around killing each other most of the time. So, and also, I can just comment a little bit about Facebook's plans for the metaverse. First of all, I do feel that the communication part of Metaverse has been very poorly done, telling the public. Everyone's scratching their head, I know what it is, but a lot of people don't. And I think they muddled the message, which is reflected in their stock price primarily. It's confusing, right? A lot of people on the board of directors have left, and Sheryl Sandberg, I think, left Wednesday, or is leaving. So it's just a muddled message. And really what I think that they're trying to do, the iPhone is a self-contained environment. If you want to write an app for the iPhone, you can do that. You become a developer. Or if there's a store online, it has a Safari, and you can put Chrome on it and other web browsers, but it's self-contained. And I think that's what Facebook needs. If I'm a game developer, I want a game interface, a game API to write games for Facebook. I really don't know why they haven't done that, because that would open up a lot of customers. Keep people glued to it, especially younger demographic, people who have leaving. That's what they need. As far as VR, what I mentioned, it's daunting to create a world. It's just labor intensive. It's done by hand. Mm-hmm. If there were a way to do that, in AI or what have you, or an algorithm to do that, there would be, I think. Perhaps there is now. It's been 8 years since I've worked in that business. But and the cybersecurity thing, Facebook does have security issues. I've discovered them myself. So don't put your PayPal address on Facebook. I did, and I got burned pretty bad. So that whole thing is another kind of subject separate from the metaverse. I've made a lot of discoveries in the past 5 years. I've been working in cybersecurity about how fragile and exposed people are with it. It's very dangerous to put financial information and so forth on the web, even though you probably have it there. And passcodes and so forth, off access points can be stolen. Oh, here's a tip: don't use your bank passcode the same as your access point, because the access point for passcode is really easy to steal. You can buy software that does it. So I didn't work in the cybersecurity business. I just started in on it because we were getting buzzed with drones. Somebody was sending a drone over us and with a camera on it and taking pictures, and we were going, who the heck's doing that? So we said, we got to find a way to get rid of the drone. So we did so to a degree. So, and that's how I got started on it. And I'm shocked by what the level of insecurity there is and how dangerous it is, really. And it's pretty surprising. So the other thing I'll just very quickly say is, if I were back in the business of creating content, I would make it for a mobile device. If I were going to write a game, I would target mobile. Everyone has one. Now, you've heard of Roblox and so forth like that, and there's other games that are mobile, but that's the platform I'd target. It has the same power as a PlayStation 3, the same horsepower, in a little tiny phone in your pocket. But that's just, I don't determine the markets and so forth. That just hasn't really played out too much that way. It's kind of headed in that direction. But putting content on a PC game, this is 2016 data, but there were only like 14 million PC gamers. It's just not a viable business to get into. You want to target consoles and so forth. And now you have a mobile phone, I would target that. So
I think that's a good choice too. Because you have to remember that people in emerging countries don't have access to high-end computers or high-end TVs, and their only view into the world is ultimately their mobile phone. So for me, if you really want a wide audience, you need to go mobile first. Okay, great. So the metaverse, what's missing to make it a reality? Jenna, you want to take that?
That's one hell of a question.
Well, I figure you're smart enough to answer it.
What's missing? Like, wow. I did not get that in advance now. Let's look at it the other way. What do we have going for us, okay? Which is shocking that I'm looking at things like glass half full.
I really, it's fascinating
yeah, I know.
to
If you
watch.
guys, any of you know me, that's so not me. I think we have so many cool developer tools. We have so many of these tech platforms now thinking about the developer community and what they want and what they can do, because you guys in this room and others are going to hack it and tell us what those formats are, what works. Do you want to have one login across all of them? And I think that's going to be the forcing function. As much as, I come from Xbox and PlayStation world, and we have, those are gated communities, if you will. Technically, you could jump across all of them, but that's not in their business interest, right? But again, things are changing. So I think that the tools and the concepts and what the agency that you all have, that's going to drive. So if you want to see what's missing, it's just the, I think it's just the openness of the tech platforms to open the gates pretty much and go, let's figure this out. Let's work together. You could still have your own ecosystems, but let's get those APIs. As much as Zuck said, it's going to be open. I don't know exactly, open for you to work with us, but we're not going to let our stuff out. I don't know. But to me, shockingly, I'm in this business because I believe in the good. I chose to go to Niantic because I believe in tech for good. I started a side business using technology for good. Most people during the pandemic wrote books or watched a lot of Law and Order. I built an IoT platform for conservation. That's what I did in my spare time. I believe in tech for good, so I'm going to think that, what's missing is just time. It's time. We need more time to get everybody working together in the metaverse and figure out what's going to work for everybody.
Great. So we have 2.5 minutes left, so let's kind of wrap up anything that you might want to say in regards to world building. I took away from this that you need to have a really big community or a very specific community of what you're building for. You need to decide what you want to build for, which medium, and how you take it across platforms. Missions, values, ethics, all are super important. And then making sure that you're being realistic in what it is that you're expecting. Does that make sense? You want to add anything, Maureen?
Yes. I will answer your last questions because I had it prepared.
Okay, go.
Well, I made it up here, but while Jenna was saying, all right, so I think there needs to be, I think Roblox has actually done an amazing job by being technologically making it so that your stuff can be on everything. So just technologically means your stuff can be everything. Another is just a unifying GUI, because I think Metaverse is just I think a digital representation in a way of our lives. So we already do the social things, but where do we do it on the internet right now? It has to be consistent so that we get trained, this is how you use a metaverse, here are the controls. I also think avatars suck right now. In the metaverse on all platforms. And for me to want that to be me and to represent me, I'd want really great avatars that have great facial expressions, because if metaverse, what we do as humans is connect with each other, so much of that is based off the subtlety. You can tell when someone's doing a fake smile versus a real smile based off of whether or not the fleshy part underneath your eye goes up. There are things like that. I want that level of fidelity on the face to be able to tell if someone's lying versus not. So I want that fidelity in the avatar. And there was one more, but I don't remember. Making money, ability to make money, so that creators are incentivized.
Never apologize to make money.
Yes. Monetization methods on the metaverse so that we can, creators are incentivized to actually create these experiences so that there's reasons for us to go onto the metaverse.
Jackie, How are you going to do, what are you going to do with sound in the metaverse, and how are you going to make it accessible for all?
I mean, I think it goes back to being able to extend your creative control into these worlds, and then being able to have it be operable. And so, again, unifying the pipeline on both the creator and the developer side is something that we are very focused on. But all these other aspects that you mentioned, you know, where do you onboard into this world? Because maybe there's multiple versions. That's all very interesting. And then, you know, before I came onto this panel, I was thinking about, like, I don't know if any of you guys know John Perry Barlow's Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace that he wrote in 1996 in response to AT&T banning swear words. It was sort of this manifesto about freedom and a world beyond this physical space, basically the cyberspace of the mind. I think it's really worthwhile checking that out again, because I think he was way, way too ahead of his time for Web 1, but his manifesto makes a lot more sense now for Web 3. And I think we do need to figure out how to make money, and we don't want the Jaron Lanier Skinner box of being this behavioral model of a avatar on the space, but at the same time, you know, you want to make it lucrative for artists and build artists into the framework of the future so it can be an amazing space. AI and robots can do all the scut work, and we can have a renaissance of the arts and science and philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Jack, so let's get back to that last question that you never really answered about the DK1 and Oculus.
You're not getting off the hook.
So the challenge that we had is we put the product on Kickstarter for PR, and you really didn't get the money to an escrow account until the product was released. So we had 90 days from the time it was on a chalkboard to the whiteboard to the time it was mass production, and that was the challenge. It was daunting at the time, because just getting the parts, they have long lead times, like 30, 40 days and so forth. So we just leaned on the staff to get it done. It was like 14-hour days, endless.
But in your mind, did you think that this is where it was all going?
Well,
or were you just trying to get a product out?
Well, we had to meet the Kickstarter obligation. That's what the truth is. And then we got investors. I didn't do that. Another guy did. We got a lot of interest, and it had a great buzz about it. The PR part, the marketing and stuff was just brilliant. It was really good. I mean, we had the whole story. Palmer Luckey, you know, this kid living in his parents' garage. Not quite true, but and then that was the story. And it's a great pitch, and he's a nice guy. He's a great guy, and he just comes across well. So, again, I had no marketing background at all. I just an engineer there. So, but I dug it. It was a great experience for me. And you know, it's hard work though. Boy, it's really hard work. And then DK2 comes along and CB1s. DK2 was 6 months. And there we go again, you know. And this is all brand new development. That DK1 was truthfully just cobbled together parts we got, so thank you.
Okay, we're getting kicked off the stage. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. Thank you to all the panelists. Appreciate you all.